Well, welcome everyone. We're happy to have you tonight. My name is Sister Colleen Gibosn, and we're happy to have those who have been with us before. And we're happy to welcome those who are new to our conversation. Just a few ground rules and a little bit of information before I begin introducing Dr. Zagano for tonight's conversation. Tonight's topic is Women Deacons, is Synodality Key? And the way that will be structured tonight is it'll be broken into two parts. So we'll begin with Dr. Zagano giving some input on the topic, about 10-15 minutes, and then we will open it up for a bit of Q&A. Because there's so many people on our call tonight, I will kind of act as our moderator. People have submitted questions beforehand, so I have those questions printed out and ready before me. But if, as Phyllis is speaking, something strikes you, you can use the chat function, which you'll find on the bottom part of your Zoom screen. You just click on chat, and we'd ask that you send those chats directly to me, directly to Colleen Gibosn, and I'll begin to kind of curate those questions and try to make our conversation flow as neatly as we can as we move through the night. As many of you know, the conversations that we're having, we have on a monthly basis, so you can mark your calendar now for next month, March 15th, Monday, March 15th, at this same time, whatever time it is where you are, it's 7:30 Eastern, you can mark your calendar. So March 15th will be our next webinar. We'll also tell you at the end of our conversation about an opportunity that's coming up with Phyllis and I with the Global Sisters Report, a Witness and Grace conversation that's happening this Friday afternoon at 3 p.m. Eastern. And in that chat function, we'll also post links throughout the night. So I'll post a registration link for the Witness and Grace conversation. We'll post links to Phyllis's website. And if anything is referenced throughout the night, we'll try to keep those links updated so that people can follow the conversation and continue to learn after the fact. If you'd like to sign up to receive Phyllis's column from NCR, we'll also post a link for that in the chat. And so I think that's it before we begin. We're so happy that you're here with us, and synodality certainly is a topic that is on everyone's mind these days, and we picked it before the news on the Synod of Bishops, and so I think it will be a fascinating topic for us to engage in conversation tonight. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Phyllis Zagano, our speaker for tonight. And, Dr. Zagano is the Senior Research Associate in Residence and an Adjunct Professor of Religion at Hofstra University. She's the author or editor of over 23 books in religious studies, including her newest offering, Women Icons of Christ, which is from Paulist Press. She also has written Women Deacons, Past, Present, Future, Women in Ministry, Emerging Questions on the Diaconate, and Women Deacons, Essays with Answers. Her award-winning Just Catholic column runs monthly in the National Catholic Reporter, and her work has won numerous awards and been translated around the world. In August of 2016, Pope Francis appointed her to the Papal Commission for the Study of Women in the Diaconate, which completed its report to the Pope at the end of 2018. It's a great pleasure to be able to engage her in conversation. We always find interesting things to talk about, and the conversation flows freely. So we're so happy to have her with us tonight, and we look forward to the conversation that we'll engage in. So Phyllis, welcome.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Colleen. We have a tough competition tonight as the House managers are wrapping up their argument in the affirmative that the President of the United States should be found guilty of high crimes and misdemeanors, but that'll be over in a half an hour. And quite frankly, I've been watching too much of it, so I'm happy to talk about something else. The word synodality has been bouncing around for a while, and I think it finally came up into the public eye with the announcement last weekend of Sister Nathalie Becart to the undersecretary position in the Synod of Bishops. And the Synod of Bishops is a standing group that, it's not a standing group, it's a standing idea with a standing office that was established actually several years ago. as many as, it's got to be at least 50 years ago. I don't have the number in my head, but Sister Nathalie, she's about 50, 51. She's from Paris, and she wasn't born in Paris, but she belongs to a Parisian order, the Xaverian missionary sisters. They have ministries also in Canada, but mostly in the Neuilly neighborhood, actually, of Paris. And she was a staffer of the Synod of Bishops before this, and before that she worked with a synod or youth ministry and youth synod in Paris. And I've met her. She's at least trilingual, bilingual, certainly French and English, and I would think Italian. So that's kind of an interesting way to enter into our topic tonight. You know, the question of synodality. You know, on women deacons, is synodality the key? And I think it's important to see where this word synodality comes from. It's actually a neologism. It's brand new. We always talk about collegiality. Well, collegiality means the bishops. And if you extract from Vatican II, from Gaudium et Spes and Lumen Gentium, if you extract the understanding that the laity is really the 99% of the church, it is the growing understanding and reception of Vatican II that the whole church has something to say about the way the church is, about the way it is run, and certainly the whole church should participate in the way the church is run. And so you'll see Pope Francis increasingly appointing lay people, and among the lay people, women lay people, to positions of somewhat authority, actually administrative authority in the church, as he can. Because there are many offices in the church, particularly in the Curia, which is his like senior staff, that don't necessarily need to have a cleric, don't necessarily need to have a priest or a deacon. And if you circle back to October of 2019 and remember the outcome of the Amazon Synod, the final document said, well, we want you to install women as lectors and acolytes. And we also would like you to really take a good look at women deacons. Well, why is that important? Well, on the Feast of the Baptism of the Lord, January 10th, as we talked about last time, he signed a document changing Canon 230, paragraph 1, from weary laity, laymen, to just lay people, can be installed as, formally installed as lectors and acolytes. Who cares? Well, in order to be ordained a deacon, one must have been installed as a lector and an acolyte. These are two of the remaining lay ministries from the suppression of the lay ministry, of the ministries, the minor orders done by Paul VI with Ministeria Quaedam in 1972. So the minor orders originally, just to refresh your memory, were lector, porter, exorcist, and acolyte. He said these are to be replaced by the installed lay ministries of lector and acolyte, the reader, and the mass server, the acolyte. Actually, the acolyte formally has more jobs than just being an altar person, altar boy, altar girl. The acolyte is a formal person is formally charged with distributing Eucharist at masses. And he also suppressed the major order of subdeacon. And just refresh your memory, it's important that it's a major order, subdeacon, and it's ordained during a mass at the altar in history. He suppressed that major order. Who cares? Well, because in some listings of the orders, you'll find subdeacon, deaconess, deacon. And some people argue that a deaconess or a female deacon, a woman deacon, is a minor order. Well, if she's a minor order, what is she doing listed between two major orders? So that's really why we think about that. So in any event, we now come to the question of synodality. Well, synodality means, there's an interesting lecture given by Cardinal Czerny, the Jesuit cardinal in migrants, in the Office for Migrants. He says, when the term synodality is used to speak about the church, It's not intended to designate a mere decision-making process. It's not about collaborative decision-making that reviews alternatives, makes a choice, distributes responsibilities, and carries out a program. Rather, synodality expresses a fundamental characteristic of the church's identity, its essential communal dimension, its essential evangelizing mission under the guidance of the Holy Spirit. Now, if you pay attention really to things that the Holy Father has written, you're going to find the word discernment coming up a lot. Good Jesuit word. And this is what he is interested in. And he feels that, and he believes that, and Cardinal Czerny in this lecture, which was published in Italian in not L'Osservatore Romano, it was published in Italian in La Civiltà Cattolica. I happen to have gotten an English copy of it. They're explaining that it's not, sitting around and having a parliamentary debate. Synodality in the church doesn't operate like Congress, doesn't operate like a parliament, doesn't operate democratically. It more operates in a spiritual dimension of group discernment. And so the group discernment process, I have to laugh sometimes when I think about this, because women religious have been doing this forever. But they've now, the men of the church have now come upon the idea of group discernment, and it's the movement of the Spirit in the church for the people who speak to us, the signs of the times, but also it's a result of prayer. It's not to argue your point with the next person, but rather to pray about it. And as the church moves together, synodality in terms of the Greek roots, walking together, the church can move together. And a lot of people have asked me, come on, when's he going to do it? When somebody wrote to me this morning or said to me on the phone, when's he going to pull the trigger on women deacons? I was like, well, it's not up to him. The good leader listens, just like the good journalist listens. The good leader listens and looks and is deeply involved with what is best for the church. I've said many times, if the church needs women deacons, it will not be denied, and it's as simple as that. So when we, as it happens, in October of 2022, at least now it's still scheduled, there will be another meeting of the Synod of Bishops. Last time they had some 300 folks coming in, many of them voting members, bishops coming from all over the world to discuss the Pan-Amazon region. That was a special meeting. This will be a regular meeting in October of 2022. Two North Americans who are on the planning committee. One is Joseph Cardinal Tobin of Newark, New Jersey, and another is Gerald Lacroix of Quebec in Canada. He is the primate of, as he's happy to say, the primate of North America. He is the most senior cleric in North America, technically. But they are two, interestingly enough, totally fluent in Spanish, who are members of the planning committee for the Synod. And both of them have told me that women will be on the agenda. And I have told both of them, you're a little late, pal, because there aren't going to be a lot of women left in the church by October of 22. But that's the tension that we're living with. The church, as one of those two men is fond of saying, Rome is the eternal city, and it sets its watch accordingly. So we can't expect things to turn on a dime. I will tell you that what I am expecting, you heard it first here, is on February 22nd, which is the Feast of the Chair of Peter. I think that's when they will release the realignment of the Curia. And once the Curia is realigned, that's his senior staff, I think you'll see a lot more action, shall we say, because the offices are going to be moved in terms of seniority, in terms of relative seniority, and then he can replace some of the people who are actually over age already. But it makes sense. You wouldn't put an individual into an office and then downgrade the office. So I think he's waiting until he has the offices all set up to make some changes. So The fact that Sister Nathalie has been appointed an undersecretary to the Synod of Bishops is very, very important, because the next person on top of her is Cardinal Gresh, who's is Maltese, actually, so he's fluent in English, and he is the secretary of the Synod of Bishops. So she will have a very interesting role, and a very important role, I think, in the planning of the next synod, which, as I said earlier, is planned for October of 2022. Another person was appointed with her, an Augustinian priest, Father Luis de Saint Martin, and he's an Augustinian. And some of the upsetment you'll see is that it has been said that he will now become bishop. And well, if he's a bishop, why isn't she a bishop? Well, that's kind of a red herring in a way. It's a silly argument. But the other point, and I really have to look carefully at the Italian. The other point is whether she will have a vote. And what Gresh said in Italian is, what's very interesting is the possibility that she's going to have a vote. So whether that's determined or not, I don't know. I can tell you I have a column moving on Friday in National Catholic Reporter on this topic, and the editor made sure that I said things like it's likely she'll have a vote, or it's possible she'll have a vote. So, but whether she has a vote or doesn't have a vote, I think is less material than the fact that she's going to be steering the boat there for a good part of the planning, and that's part of it. Well, what does this have to do with women deacons? Well, the question of women deacons is in the air. I had something like 4 or 5 requests from media today at various levels. I mean, a young man who has a podcast or something, and he has 15,000 people who listen to him, wants to interview me, and so does the New Yorker magazine, which probably has as many people but twice his age, and so it is something that's being discussed, and I am continually asked what happens next. I had an email today from people in California who have been discussing one of my books. I think they've been discussing this one, Women Deacons, Past, Present, Future, and with the study guide, which is available on my website. And they said, we've got 40 people. We want to know what do we do next? And it sounds almost like a cop-out, but I say, well, it's very important to pray about it, and to return to the point of synodality. This is not a political discussion. It involves people, but it's not to be handled the way politics are. It's not the way community organizers work. It's not that kind of a thing. So I think that the usual answers, we tell people, go ahead, write your bishop, have bishops ignore women's letters, and that as well as I do. Somebody gave me an idea yesterday or today, go to the ladies' night at the parish and listen to whoever's speaking about whatever is speaking, and very carefully raise your hand and say, could we talk about women deacons, and see what happens. So there are different things you can do. But I've spoken for about 15 minutes. Let me get some questions and we can keep on going. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Phyllis. I think that's really informative and really gives us good context on synodality. What do we mean when we talk about that? And how does it tie in to recent events? You said one of the questions that came in advance was about the Synod of Bishops, and I think you covered a lot of it. You said there may not be many women in the church by 2022, but do you think there's a prospect that more women will be appointed as undersecretaries? Or you talked about kind of the realignment of the curia and the possibility of that coming out soon. There was another question about kind of like, when could that happen, or how long does that take? So how long has that been in the works?
Well, I mean, the Holy Father has been moving women into various positions of authority and as he can. And you'll find that at the local level too. I don't know how many women chancellors in dioceses in the United States, but he also had a woman judge, and I don't know the details, but a woman was appointed to a judicial position in the Vatican, which was a new position for a woman to be in. It had previously been held by a cleric. So that's a very interesting one, because the one of the arguments for ordaining women as deacons is that only a cleric can be a single judge in a clerical in a canonical trial. So this, however, is kind of on the civil side in the Vatican, which has lawsuits and things. So he's putting women into positions of authority where they are. It's not tokenism. I think that's the important thing to remember. These are extremely well educated and well positioned women, multilingual, who have the education. Nathalie Beckhart did studies at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago. And she's just come off a year at Boston College studying theology. I think it was a sabbatical year. I didn't get a chance to see her because nobody can go anyplace, but I know that she was up there studying. So it's not looking around the room and saying, you know, hey Mary, come on over, we've got a job for you. These are people who have been. They're not necessarily careerists, but they are known to their bishops, and they are known, in her case at least, in the Vatican, because she's worked there. So how fast can it go? How fast can anything go in Rome? Who knows?
As you said, they set their watch by a different clock. So we can hope and we can wait, and we can certainly pray. And as you mentioned,
I think it's a sundial that they use.
Right, and they're tabulating all the finances on an abacus, but that is neither here nor there. Another question that came in, and you mentioned the Synod of the Amazon and how that was a special, that was a special meeting. One of the questions that came in was a question following up on that Synod and asking, what happened in the wake of the Synod on the Amazon, and why, when Pope Francis so strongly speaks about synodality and encouraging matters to be raised and conversation to happen, and he seems to have responded positively to the recommendations of the Synod, we haven't seen any movement on the pastoral roles in the ways that the Amazonian Synod talked about that. So I guess the question is, what has happened in the wake of the Synod on the Amazon?
Well, a very big move was, as I said earlier, Canon 230, paragraph 1 was changed. That was an outright request of the Synod to install women as lectors and acolytes. That actually was a request, at least to formally install women as lectors, of a 2008 Synod, and it was just totally ignored. I just wrote someplace, I think it'll appear in the Pastoral Review in London, the history of women lectors, that even after the 1983 code came out with Canon 230, paragraph 2, which said any layperson can perform the duties of lector or acolyte, that the acolyte part was just kind of, we're not doing that, God forbid they should be near the altar. But in the lector part, there's a lot of discussion that if a woman is going to be a lector, you have to have like a separate female ambo that's outside the altar rail. And that conversation went on for a long time in the Congregation for Divine Worship. So it wasn't until 1992 that it was judged that Canon 230, paragraph 2, any layperson, meant also any female layperson. But it took another 2 years for the Congregation for Divine Worship to tell the bishops that. But of course, Bishop, you don't really have to do it if you don't want to. So in terms of how long it takes things to get moving, I know the Holy Father told the Congregation for Divine Worship at one point that women could be among the 12 to have their feet washed in the Holy Thursday ceremonies. It took 14 months for the Congregation to Divine Worship to release that notice. And I'm here to tell you that a lot of dioceses, a lot of bishops just said, oh, well, it's an optional. We're not going to do foot washing this year. So how long it takes to do it and then how long it takes to implement are two different things. So I think the conversation really is not so much about women deacons, because as I've said actually here before, I think it's John of Salamis, writing to the bishop in the next diocese, said, well, I've got women deacons, but I know you don't like them, so I don't send them as missionaries to your diocese. I think the change has to be not only top down, it has to be bottom up. And the point of synodality is for the church to move together on this. And there's two steps to the moving together. That's probably a mixed metaphor, but one first, women deacons need to be approved, but secondly, women deacons need to be supported and received. And I'm sure folks here tonight and folks all around the world are still suffering the damages of being treated, women being treated badly by clerics, by bishops. The horrible things that have happened to women in confession and counseling and all sorts of problems. So the how long part, we'll go back to the sundial.
In terms of mixed metaphors, it's like a three-legged race in some ways. But you speaking about movement and even the fact that the root of synodality is walking together, and you talked about it doesn't necessarily need to be from top down and bottom up. There have been, and we had a couple of questioners that were talking about the German church and about synodality and the Church of Germany, the Catholic Church in Germany, and talking about the synodal way, which is an Episcopal committee in the German church that's doing work to really implement new forms of church governance, including trying to democratize power and loosen the bishop's authority and kind of shift some decision-making power to the laity. So I wonder if you could speak a little bit about what's happening in Germany and how it's tied into synodality, and then how that could influence, because I know the topic of women deacons has come up in Germany and in those Episcopal conversations.
Right, in 25 words or less.
Yeah.
So yeah.
The sundial, I'll set the sundial.
Okay, here you go. The German church has called together a synod, had fabulous working groups on a lot of different topics. I've been in touch with the woman who's in charge of the women's committee, and she actually helped an article I wrote with Father Bernard Poitier, which we wrote in French, and then it was published in Indian English. She helped us get it translated to German, and it's being published next month in Vienna in German. But all that by way of saying that there's certainly receptivity to our research in the Women's Committee there. In terms of what's going on, the Pope has actually spoken about the German Synod and says, look, there's some things you can't decide. So there has to be a split here on whether things that are doctrinal can be viewed as doctrinal evolution, able to evolve, such as Canon 230, paragraph 1. It really is an evolution of doctrine that women now can be installed as lectors and acolytes, and things that simply can't change, and some things that the church feels, the church teaches cannot change is women priests. However, if I understand the documents that the German Synod are considering, they are affirmatively asking for women deacons and affirmatively asking separately for the consideration of women priests, so that they've bifurcated the issue here, and to circle and married. I'm sure they were asking for married clergy. To circle back to the Amazon Synod, these are the same issues that were discussed. And women priests were kind of put aside. Women deacons were studied, were considered. 9 of the 12 language groups, I'm told, were very positive in terms of asking for women deacons, probably more in terms of ordaining married men as priests. And this is something that's now coming out of the German Synod. Now, if we go back to South America, we can find that the 9 countries and 1 territory, it would be 8 countries and 1 territory, have each contributed a bishop to a new ecclesial body, which has been officially received in Rome, with a president, an additional bishop, a retired Cardinal Claudio Humas, as its president. Now, why is that important? Because the Holy Father long ago said about married men, well, just ask me. And I think he's waiting for more groups, such as the body in Brazil, or headed in Brazil, the body in Germany, to simply ask him. I mean, if you have a synodal process, and you have it in Germany, and you have this ecclesial body in South America asking for the same thing, well, something's happening. The Spirit is moving in the church, and that is the key. He is not listening for, as I said earlier, the political discussion about women deacons, the political discussion about more women in power, the political discussion about more women in authority, the political discussion about women. What he's asking for, what he's listening for, is the movement of the Spirit that will show how 99% of the church, the laity, more than 50% of the church, the females, can better participate in the evangelizing mission of the church. The important words in the announcement of the synod are, and I lost it because this got edited, are communion, participation, and mission. Okay? He wants to enter into a serious discernment about how the church, that is the communion of all of us, can participate and can move along in mission in the light of the Spirit. The key word, again, is discernment. So how will Germany help? Well, Germany is the one that's doing a synod now. Others will call synods. It's a new old idea in a way. If you think of St. Ambrose, poor Ambrose, wasn't even a deacon. I don't even think he was baptized. And he wandered into the cathedral in Milan one day and ended up getting dragged up the front and made the bishop. Now, how did that happen? It happened by the people said, this is what we want. That's something that's coming out of the German synod. That's something that it wasn't so much emphasized, I don't think, at the Amazon synod, but it is certainly something that's discussed in the United States. People need to have more of a part, or more of a role to play in the determination of who's a bishop. Nicholas Caffardi, as an attorney, had a long article in Commonweal about how the laity really even have no participation in the choosing of bishops or the vetting of bishops, because the laity who are considered will get a letter. What do you think about, Monsignor X, Y, or Z? But who gets the letter? Well, they're the people who are known to the bishop. Who are the people known to the bishop? They're the big donors. So that there needs to be a different way of your voices being heard. And I'm a fan and not a fan of social media, but I think that the discussion needs to go forward. I hope that answers your question there.
I think it does, and it picks up, I think, kind of looking at the, how do I want to say, like the local church, the church in all these different places, that it's, they're taking the ideas and the interests that bubble up from below and distilling them to bring them up to a higher level. So I think in some ways that's what's happening in Germany, and they're really looking at how to empower lay voices, how to do that work of electing bishops, and how to do that in a more democratic way, in a way of involving people and involving lay councils. That could really have a part to play in the midst of this conversation that we're having about women deacons. So you said the Pope has said, simply ask me. If somebody asks, then it gives a space for a response to come. A series of questions came in around decision-making and whose voices are being listened to. In some ways, you kind of answered this of, it's the donors that are gone, who are solicited for responses, but one of the questioners says, do you think Pope Francis will rely mostly on voices of the faithful on the subject of women in the diaconate? Or do you think theology also tips the scales, since the magisterium, who is seen by the Pope as the protectors of the faith, will most likely be involved in this decision? So who do you think, is there a weight placed on different voices? Are there only certain voices that make their way through? So how is the Pope, how is he able to listen to all these different voices?
I don't know. It's a mystery to me how I was appointed to the first commission for the study of the female diaconate, or study of the diaconate of women, except for the fact that I published on the topic. And I wasn't publishing in L'Osservatore Romano or La Civiltà Cattolica. I hadn't been to Rome in years. And so it was the people who lifted up my name. I put my name out there. I did my research, but the International Union of Superiors General were the people who nominated me. But then it was the Pope and his staff, I assume, who, from what I can understand, have read everything, including my laundry lists, before I was appointed. So there's the vetting process. But in my case, at least, the vetting process was done by academic, refereed journals. My work was refereed before it was published in Theological Studies and elsewhere. I knew no one at the International Union of Superiors General, so they got whatever they got, however they got it. And then, and I knew no one on the Holy Father's staff. I mean, it wasn't the old, I had no entree into the old boy network. And so, I think that, I'd like to think is the work of the Holy Spirit, in a way, encouraging people, or just, something fell on somebody's desk and they read it, and we got it there. And I think Women Deacons is moving in the same way. Because you have to believe that the discussion. I mean, if my emails today are any example, you have to believe that people are talking about this. You have to believe that people are interested in it. And I mean, the fact that we have a couple of hundred folks on tonight, even though there's the impeachment trial going on, gives witness to the fact that either they're kind of impeached out, or they're really interested and they want to talk, they want to do something, and I think that's a normal reaction of if in prayer the response, your response is about women deacons is that you're going to go and scream at your bishop, that's probably not the Holy Spirit, but if it's a consideration that maybe you want to talk to people about this, even the bishop, or maybe you want to write something about this, even to the bishop, the more gentle the intuition, I think, the more real it is. And so I think that's the Holy Father is listening, and he will hear. You can hear in people's voices the distinction between when they're pushing their own agenda and they're pushing the agenda that would be useful to the church. And that to me is the bottom line. If women deacons are useful to the church, as I said earlier, if the church needs women deacons, it will not be denied.
Yeah, and I think what you said before about discernment, there's three key terms: communion, participation, and mission. That it comes back to that. It's exciting to see movement, but the way in which we move forward is to engage in those ways. It's not reactionary. It's to be engaged in mission, to be seeking communion, and to participate. Phyllis, one of the questions that came in, and I know we try to avoid political language. So the question is, who would you consider allies in this effort? And another question was, who's speaking up on the topic of women deacons? Who's speaking up for women deacons when we think about in the idea of synodality? Who in that process is speaking up for women deacons?
I don't know. I know that I saw a clip of Bishop McElroy from the West Coast, I think San Diego, at the Synod, and it's on a website, St. Phoebe Day website, um, that's run out of North Carolina and now I think out of California and Miami. Actually, 3 folks working on it, and he was quite forthright. He said this is perfectly reasonable. During the Synod, Bishop Crowder of South America was speaking up on it. Who is continuing to speak about it, I don't know. I mean, the bishops in the German Synod are speaking up about it. But then again, speaking up and to whom? I think we are still at the point where the discussion is not so much speaking up as in being a proponent. It's more encouraging the discussion. Okay, and that discussion, a gentle discussion, not a screaming match, a prayerful discussion, such as the California folks that use the study guide for this book said. I'm sure, to go into the discussion, you may be already predisposed, but I would think predisposed to the fact that women can be deacons. I think it's a separate question over whether an individual diocese or even religious institute, such as we'll be discussing on Friday, whether women should be deacons. I think it's totally different things, such as John Salama said, I'm not sending them over to your diocese because for whatever reason you don't think you need them. So.
I think that's great. And, it speaks to that idea of communal discernment. We bring what we offer, we hold it lightly, and we're attentive to the Spirit in that space. And so that ties into all of that. We had a number of questions, Phyllis, about clerical structures. And the question about, will having women deacons in our church change the clerical structure, the clerical nature, the clerical structure of our church? And oftentimes people speak to, the male dominance of church governance, but how would having women deacons influence kind of the structure of the church?
I don't know. I don't know what the question means in terms of the clerisy. A woman deacon would be a deacon, just as a man deacon is a deacon. I had a conversation, strangely enough, today with someone who runs the institute that teaches exorcists at Mundelein in Chicago, and he said, "Well, we train priests and deacons," and I didn't want to start. So I didn't say, well, why don't you have women? Or if you had women deacons, would you train them? About 150 people in the United States have gone through priests and deacons, and the deacons are used to do intake on cases where individuals are coming to the bishop and coming to the exorcist of the bishop to discuss their problem. I think that it would be a slow process to incorporate a woman deacon, since it has been such a slow process in many places to incorporate deacons, period. In too many places, in the words of a former archbishop, American archbishop, now cardinal in Rome, said to me, too many of the deacons are Sunday dress up guys. They don't do anything else except they want to come and dress up and walk around. And but in terms of doing the work of the diaconate, so many women are doing the work of the diaconate that if they were ordained as deacons in their parishes or the religious institutes, they would then be able to, for example, and if you talk about inserting oneself into the structure, they would be able to be single judges if they had that job. They could be a single judge in a canonical hearing. They would be represented in the liturgy on the weekends and would be able to preach. And I'd much rather hear about the sister who is running the food bank opening up the scripture than the one I've spoken about before. I went to him and I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm the deacon." I said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm an accountant." I was like, "Fine." He's kind of wondering what his ministry was, but he didn't have one. So,
yeah, in previous conversations, Phyllis, we've talked about, in advocating for women deacons, kind of people often rely on the history of women deacons and how the shift really is to now the pastoral need for women deacons. And one of the questions that came in was about kind of the first women deacons and the term, diaconia, diaconia, which is used, and one of our questioners actually cited from NCR. They send out these Sunday resources for the readings, and so Sister Mary McGlone was reflecting this past Sunday on the healing of Peter's mother-in-law, and that in the translation, our questioner says, Mark uses the word that she got up and she served, and uses the word diaconia, which is the source for the word deacon. And so it's this question of, that word in the Gospel of Mark is used in that place for Jesus's service and for the women who attend to Jesus at the tomb and witness the crucifixion. So the question that kind of comes through is, what's your take on that? And could you offer some insight into the use of the term diaconia and talk a little bit more about the nature of diaconal service?
Well, the root is diaconate, and it's John N. Collins, who unfortunately isn't on tonight, is really the expert on the word, where the word is in scripture and how it's used. One of the translations of that passage from Mark, I think it is that Peter's mother-in-law got up and she waited on them, like she's a table waiter. "Hi, I'm Taffy. I'll read you the menu," and that is. It's a diminution of the word, and most people don't look to Mark for that in terms of, somebody wrote someplace, do you think that Peter's mother-in-law was the first deacon? I was like, well, it's actually Phoebe was the only person in scripture who's called deacon, and we look to Acts for the calling of the seven, who, important point, are put forward by the assembly. Okay, they are put forward by the assembly, and the apostles lay hands on them. And in scripture, it's thought to be 7 men, which should be it's an important number. But the word itself has the service implied, but more than waiting on tables. I guess that's the point. When you look at the argument, the passage in the pericope in Acts, the bishops, the apostles say, the bickering between the Greek-speaking and the Hebrew-speaking women, and one says they're not getting their fair share of the distribution, meaning the food and the money, and it sometimes is watered down to say, well, all they did was wait on tables, or give out food. But the notion of service is much broader, and this is where I would, if you're really interested in it, send you to John N. Collins's extraordinarily detailed and important work on the word. I'm not an expert in terms of biblical exegesis, particularly in Greek, but I would say that the job of the deacon is to be of service to the community. I was going over a manuscript today. Only until 2002, the deacons was in nomine ecclesiae. Nomine ecclesia Christi, in the name of Christ Church, the deacon worked. It's only in 2002 that they invented in persona Christi servi, in the person of Christ the servant. So before 2002, documents on the deacon works in nomine ecclesiae. So working in the name of the church, what does that mean? Well, the deacon, and if you think of the deacon in the liturgy, the deacon is always between the people of the assembly and the celebrant. So if there's somebody to talk to the people of the assembly, it's the deacon. And the deacon is really the go-between, in the liturgy at least, between the people of God and the assembly. And it's the deacon who really has to have his, or we would hope her, ear to the ground about the needs of the people of God. In my own parish, we have a lot of homebound people, and nobody thought to get the mass books, the annual mass books to them. So I've been running around on weekends, knocking on doors, giving people books, because we don't have a deacon who works as a deacon. And that to me is diaconal work. And it's not my full-time work. I see people and kind of see what I can do. It's also a presence. And sometimes the deacon, because of his married status, just as a sister, because of a public consecration, but being female, is more appropriate and more accessible to the people of God than the priest. And that's another way to think about diaconal service, because if you think in the 40s about the French worker priest movement, that really was to get French priests on the assembly line, to be speaking with the people. Well, the deacon really, and a lot of the documents about the deacon usually goes to work every day, as an accountant, as a teacher, as a cop. There are all sorts of people who have been ordained to the diaconate, but they are known in their workplaces as they are known in their communities, and they are sometimes more approachable and accessible. Many people are hesitant to approach, even to go bang on the parish door, to approach the priest. And you find this particularly in Hispanic neighborhoods, where people are just hesitant for many reasons, many of which the Holy Father has spoken about, many of which involve money, that you can't do anything unless there's money involved. So
that's very interesting, Phyllis. You've written in a number of places. I think it was also in your the series of essays that you did for the Global Sisters Report, that there have been multiple commissions on women deacons, and none have kind of, we haven't seen not that we haven't seen the fruit of them, but they haven't been conclusive. And so a question as we look at that is, what gives you hope of action as we move forward, and as we see, we know that the newest commission hasn't met yet, but what gives you hope as you look forward and look towards some action on this topic?
What gives me hope as I look forward, and what action? I'm just looking at the time. We have about 5 minutes left. Today's the feast of Saint Scholastica, and in terms of action, I don't know if you know of this passage, or folks know of this passage. I love it. I wait for it to come up every February 10th. Saint Scholastica was the twin sister of Saint Benedict, and I've been up there. They're actually buried together in Monte Cassino, and they about once a year he would go down to her monastery about a mile away, and they would talk. And so on this particular date, he was down and they were talking, and they had supper, and then he wanted to go home, and she said, "Oh, no, I want you to stay." And he said, "Oh no, I got to go home. I got to go home." And she said, "No, I want you to stay." So when she heard her brother refuse her request, this is from the Office of Readings, the holy woman joined her hands on the table, laid her head on them, and began to pray. As she raised her head from the table, there was such a brilliant flash of lightning, such great peals of thunder, and such a heavy downpour of rain, that neither Benedict nor his brethren could stir across the threshold of the place where they had been seated. Sadly, he began to complain. "May God forgive you, sister. What have you done?" "Well," she answered, "I asked you and you would not listen, so I asked my God who listened. So now go off if you can, leave me and return to your monastery." And I think that's really the answer. Um, you know, we can ask the bishops, we can ask everybody we want, but I think if we ask God, that will be the answer. I really do. So that's my answer for action.
I think that's a pretty good answer, Phyllis. We have just a limited amount of time, and a number of, I go through these questions as they come in, and a number of people speak about, if this is a matter of justice, if this is a matter of service, if this is a matter of, if having women deacons is fill in the blank. So Phyllis, I guess as all these Zoom classes are online right now, I'm going to give you a fill in the blank question. So Phyllis, when you think about women deacons, what would you say? Women deacons, it's a matter of blank. Is it a matter of service? Is it a matter of hope? Is it a matter of justice? Is it a matter of equity? As we understand it.
Yes.
Yes, all of the above.
Yeah, well, these are the words that we need to bring. Justice, yeah, but justice for the people of God, for the needs of the people of God, so that the church can show the rest of the world that women are made in the image and likeness of God, that women are the face of Christ. These are important. These are the important points. Anyway, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I want to say, Colleen, too. I want to do a little commercial.
Yeah.
Lent is coming up, and this is a little book I wrote, and it's from Franciscan Media, and it's now $5, and it's meditations, sacred silence, daily meditations for Lent, and you can get it as a. I hate it when people do these things in webinars, but I really want to ask people to pray for themselves and for the people of God, and for women deacons as we go through the season. I just found out I can have a foot COVID shot on February 19th. I hope you all will be able to get there soon too. So, we're in tough times, and thanks for coming.
Yeah, and I think, just to echo Phyllis, you did pretty good at fill in the blank. In the chat, we have a number of things. People say it is a matter of need, it's a matter of service, it's a matter of inevitability. It is a matter of all of those things. I'm going to put in the chat right now a link if you want to register for the conversation that we'll be having on Friday with Gail DeGeorge from the Global Sisters Report. It'll be a conversation on the series of essays that Phyllis did on women religious and women deacons, and my own article on Phoebe. So there's a link to register there. I'm also going to put in a link to Phyllis's website, which will give you links to all of her books, including, I think, Sacred Silence is on there. But also you can see previous webinars. You can find videos of those, things that Phyllis has written. A whole host of things. It's really a wonderful resource. So that's in the chat right now. And I just want to thank everyone for being here with us tonight. We hope that you can join us for our next webinar, which will be on Monday, March 15th at the same time as our webinar was tonight. And we always have fruitful discussions. And I want to thank you for that, Phyllis, and thank each one of you for engaging in this important conversation and being active and doing, all the good work out there on the ground to lift up your voices so that people hear, and so that all of our voices can be considered and heard. So thank you so much.
Thank you.